In the 1960s, Texas oil millionaire Al Meadows was building an extraordinary collection of masterpieces. A passionate art lover, he devoted years and large sums of money to curating his private gallery, showcasing works by some of the modern era's greatest artists. The majority of these paintings were purchased from a charismatic duo, Fernand Legros and Réal Lessard. Over 3 years, these two men supplied Meadows with what he believed to be priceless works of art, acquired at unbelievable bargain prices. But this million-dollar collection concealed a devastating secret. These weren't masterpieces, they were fakes. The art world was rocked by one of the biggest scandals of the 20th century, a tangled web of international warrants, lawsuits, and arrests. But where did these fake works of art actually come from? What unseen artist possessed the cunning and nerve to fool collectors, curators, and connoisseurs on a global stage?
Exposed, a man who holds the art world to ransom.
You're talking about Elmyr.
This is the story of Elmyr de Hory, the elusive talent behind the greatest art fraud of his time.
He's now known as the greatest art forger in the world.
But I don't admit anything, I just talk about it.
But how did Elmyr get away with creating forgeries for decades? Why did the gatekeepers of the art world fall for his masterful fakes? How did he become a media sensation? And what does it take to create a deeply seductive lie that so many want to believe?
If you hang them in a museum or in a collection, great paintings, and if they hang long enough there, they become real.
The man who would become the enigmatic art forger Elmyr de Hory began life as someone else, Elmyr Albert Hoffman, born in Budapest in 1906. Elmyr's first and perhaps greatest creation was himself. As an adult, he crafted a personal myth with all the intricacy and calculation of his artistic forgeries.
His world is a world of make-believe.
He spun tales of aristocratic lineage, claiming his father was a diplomat and his mother from a wealthy banking family. The myth-making deepened even further, with claims German forces killed his family and seized their estate during the Second World War. But records show his mother and brother actually survived the war. He wanted the world to see him as aristocracy, but the truth was far less glamorous.
He has developed a fiction about his life, and to destroy that fiction would tear down the whole castle that he's built.
Historical documents reveal Elmyr came from a modest middle-class family. His merchant father provided a stable home in Hungary. His formal training began at 16 in a Hungarian artist colony steeped in Impressionist influence, followed by further studies in Munich. It was through this education he built his foundation in the fundamentals: light and color, anatomy, and perspective. By 1926, at the age of 20, he left Munich for Paris, the heart of modernism, enrolling at the Académie de la Grande Chaumière. He had the talent, he had the ambition, but Elmyr was a man out of time. His interest in more traditional methods was a barrier in an art world where styles like abstraction and modernism reigned. Elmyr's prospects collapsed in the late 1920s, a period marked by economic turmoil. Faced with dwindling sales and limited resources, Elmyr turned not yet to art forgery, but toward a life of petty crime. Between 1927 and 1931, he was convicted at least 10 times across 5 European cities for offenses like check fraud, document counterfeiting, and falsely claiming aristocratic rank. Crimes born out of desperation and a desire to maintain a lifestyle beyond his means. A skilled artist and a practiced criminal, it was only a matter of time before those two worlds collided. When World War II erupted, Elmyr returned to Hungary. What happened next is murky. This period is obscured by his constant myth-making. The only certainty is that Elmyr emerged from the chaos of war with his ambition and his capacity for deception intact. After the war, Elmyr returned to a recovering Paris, hoping to finally make a living as a professional artist. But his traditional figurative style of painting had fallen out of fashion, eclipsed by the rising tide of avant-garde movements such as Fauvism and Cubism. He was struggling to survive, desperate and broke. But then, a chance encounter changed everything. According to Elmyr, a wealthy Englishwoman visited his studio. she noticed a pen and ink drawing on his wall, which she mistook for a Picasso. The drawing was actually one of Elmyr's. In that moment, Elmyr faced a choice: correct her and remain a starving artist, or sell it as a Picasso.
Because it was the day after payment for the rent, and I didn't have the money for the rent, so I sold it to her.
This moment marked a turning point, the beginning of his career of artistic deception. He expanded his repertoire beyond Picasso to include other styles such as those of Henri Matisse and Amedeo Modigliani.
I don't feel bad for Modigliani, I feel good for me.
Crucial to his forgeries was attempting to replicate the techniques, colors, and quirks of these masters.
Matisse's lines were never that sure as mine. He was hesitant when he made the drawing, you know?
But passing his fakes off as authentic required more than an artistic hand. Initially, he kept away from canvas paintings and focused almost exclusively on creating forgeries on paper. He could easily create an aged look to the paper with a tea-brushing technique, helping with the deception. A drawing on paper could more easily avoid detection, whereas canvas paintings could be more easily traced and authenticated. To help in his scheme, Elmyr found an accomplice by the name of Jacques Chamberlain. They toured across Europe selling Elmyr's fakes, but had a falling out after Elmyr realized Chamberlain was taking most of their profits for himself.
He did not have any true insight into human nature, and that's what left him open and vulnerable to the exploitation of others.
After the fallout, Elmyr was looking for new markets ripe for his deceptions. In 1947, he shifted his focus across the Atlantic, journeying to Rio de Janeiro, and then later that year to the United States. He blitzed through New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and Chicago, leaving a trail of forged masterpieces in his wake. He produced hundreds of pastiches echoing masters of the modern era.
He did not copy particular paintings. What he did was to imitate the style of that particular artist.
His work was so convincing that reputable galleries and even museums bought pieces he had forged, charming buyers with stories of his family collection rescued from war-torn Europe. When painting on canvas, Elmyr needed to ensure his forgeries that were meant to be decades old appeared legitimate to authenticators. A key feature to his deceptions lay in the canvases themselves. He acquired older paintings from flea markets, scraped off the existing image, then painted his fake masterpieces over the aged canvas. He wasn't just faking the paint, he was faking history. His years of travels in America gave him a taste of luxury, but in 1955, the cracks in his system began to show.
Because the FBI and the police in 4 different states were on his tail.
He faced fraud charges in Chicago for selling forged paintings to art dealer Joseph W. Faulkner. The walls were closing in. But since he was living in an age without advanced databases tracking fraud, Elmyr could move to a new city and change his name. To escape the fraud charges in Chicago, Elmyr simply fled.
He had to whip off to Mexico and then up to Canada and then back to New York.
He sold his works under aliases like Louis Cassou, Joseph Dory, E. Reynal, and Baron Elmyr von Hory.
He's called it Ori, Uri, Bori, Suri, Kori, Bari, Dori, all the...
After once again returning to Los Angeles, he attempted to keep a low profile, selling original artworks, but found little success. Elmyr knew how to create the fakes, he knew how to charm his clients, but he couldn't sustain the operation alone. He needed a frontman. It was after returning to New York in 1955 that Elmyr made a pact with infamy.
And I'm ready to accept the challenge.
While hosting a party, Elmyr met Fernand Legros, a flamboyant and ruthless art dealer. Elmyr was convinced to partner with Legros. They quickly launched their operation, which included Canadian Réal Lessard, with whom Legros had both a business and personal relationship. Legros and Lessard traveled the world convincing a vast number of buyers that Elmyr's forgeries were the real deal. But how did they convince art dealers and collectors that Elmyr's fakes were authentic? Legros and Lessard pulled it off by not just faking the art, they faked the truth itself. They bribed art experts to provide phony guarantees of authenticity for Elmyr's fakes. They were reportedly even able to trick famed elderly artist Kees van Dongen to authenticate one of the Elmyr fakes as one of his genuine works. They also took advantage of auctions by selling and then buying back Elmyr's forgeries, creating a false record of public sale. Their multiple levels of deception made the operation highly successful.
It's no wonder that a faker like Elmyr can get away with it for 22 years.
Estimates place Elmyr's output during this period at over 1,000 pieces, sold across 5 continents, showing profits in the tens of millions of dollars. But there is no honor among thieves. Elmyr's business relationship with Legros was built on a foundation of deceit. The partnership fractured when Elmyr discovered Legros was hoarding the vast majority of the profits. But in 1959, after leaving the United States, Elmyr reconnected with Legros in Paris. The two were able to patch things up, and a new deal was struck. Elmyr would move to a remote location to work, with Legros paying him a steady allowance. Elmyr was seemingly tired of life on the run and satisfied with a stable income. In 1962, he moved to the Spanish island of Ibiza, which at the time was an affordable, bohemian escape. Freedom from the intense legal scrutiny he faced in other parts of the world made it an ideal refuge.
I liked life here. I liked the island. I liked the atmosphere. I liked the people. And so I decided that is the place where I want to settle.
With this arrangement in place, Elmyr's stream of artistic deception continued. But their ambition was about to outweigh their caution. They were about to try fooling the wrong man. Olger H. Meadows, known more simply as Al Meadows, rose from humble beginnings to become a multi-millionaire oil tycoon through his sharp business decisions and bold negotiating skills. Based in Dallas, Texas, his fortune allowed him to indulge in his passion for art. In the early 1960s, following the death of his first wife, Meadows donated his collection of primarily Spanish art to Southern Methodist University. After marrying his second wife, Elizabeth, in 1962, his collecting shifted toward French Impressionist and Post-Impressionist works. This new focus led him to a fresh circle of art dealers. Enter Legros and Lessard. The two first paid a visit to the Meadows home in 1964, arriving with a trunk full of paintings. Both Al and Elizabeth were interested in the works, but in looking to get another opinion, they invited over their friend, decorator Evelyn Lambert, whose artistic judgment they trusted. Evelyn was a little suspicious, but both Al and Elizabeth bought into the scam, convinced by Legros' charm and the certificates of authenticity. Over a 3-year period, Meadows purchased an irresistible trove of works from Legros and Lessard, dozens of paintings purportedly by names like Dufy, Derain, and Modigliani. In 1965, Meadows had his collection appraised at a value of over $1.3 million, pleasing news for the man with a self-described weakness for bargains, since he only paid around $375,000 for all the works. But the appraiser had doubts about several of the paintings in the collection. Others with expertise suspected these works were fakes, but who would be brave enough to tell the powerful Al Meadows his treasures were trash? Meadows' suspicions were seemingly increased after finding out about quarrels between Legros and Lessard, which resulted in Lessard having Legros arrested in Miami. In early 1967, Meadows arranged to have a number of his paintings closely examined by a collection of experts from across the country. Under intense scrutiny, the beautiful lie collapsed. After a long, close look at the works, Meadows received the hard news. The vast majority of his paintings were fakes. Meadows was stunned, humiliated, but rather than retreating, he went public. Meadows took his story to the press, exposing what became the decade's largest art fraud and transforming his embarrassment into a public crusade. The news filled headlines around the world, as an international warrant was issued for the arrest of Legros and Lessard, leading authorities on a multi-year pursuit. The Meadows scandal finally exposed the sprawling forgery network powered by the artwork of Elmyr de Hory. Yet the legal saga was far from over. With Legros and Lessard on the run, international attention on art fraud intensified. The name Elmyr de Hory was finally becoming more well known to law enforcement.
He's scared. I mean, there could be a jail sentence hanging over his head.
In 1968, Elmyr's quiet life on Ibiza temporarily ended with an arrest, but not for forgery. He spent 2 months in a Spanish prison for living in Spain without proper residency papers and consorting with known criminals. Bringing forgery charges against Elmyr proved to be a major challenge. Painting in the style of a famous artist wasn't illegal, only the false signature constituted forgery. Elmyr avoided this legal trap by often leaving the signing to Legros.
Elmyr had some crazy idea that if he did the paintings but didn't do the fake signature, then he hadn't done anything wrong.
Another reason why bringing charges against Elmyr was difficult had to do with the possibility of implicating art dealers who could have been complicit.
A court case that any art dealer who took the stand would automatically become suspect.
At least one art dealer, Francois Reichenbach, who became more well known as a filmmaker, admitted to turning a blind eye to the paintings he purchased from Elmyr, confessing he chose not to question their authenticity, despite his suspicions.
I said where they come from, but I didn't try to investigate too much. But I kept
Why didn't you?
like everyone.
You didn't want to know!
Not too much.
It was during this chaotic period that Elmyr met Clifford Irving, an American writer fascinated by the artist's stories of deception. Irving proposed a collaboration that became the 1969 biography, Fake. The book was a sensation, turning Elmyr into a witty, rebellious media figure.
Some people even say, after I did read the book of Clifford Irving about you, I like you even more than before.
But ever the storyteller, Elmyr attempted using the biography to continue blurring fact with fiction.
He has developed a fiction about his life. The illusion, for example, that he has not broken any law.
The book's credibility also came into question after its author became known as a con artist in his own right, for a fake autobiography of billionaire Howard Hughes. Two master manipulators weaving a narrative about the nature of truth. Elmyr's personality earned him friendships with luminaries like actress Ursula Andress, the original Bond girl, the legendary Marlene Dietrich, and Orson Welles, who went on to feature Elmyr in his documentary, F for Fake.
By way of introduction, this is a film about trickery.
The 1973 film cemented Elmyr's legend. Welles portrayed him as a charming rogue, using his story to explore questions of truth and deception in art.
Elmyr is a profound embarrassment to them all.
While Elmyr lived a seemingly glamorous life in Ibiza, his status was just another forgery. He did not own the clifftop villa he lived in, which was held in the name of Fernand Legros, effectively keeping Elmyr dependent.
Whole lot of them anyway made profits of 100% and more on these affairs, and Elmyr himself has really made very little.
He wasn't a businessman, so that's why he was easily taken advantage of.
He was living in a trap, and international justice was closing in. French authorities pursued forgery charges, reportedly aided by the vengeful and restyled Fernand Legros. Political shifts in Spain also eroded Elmyr's sanctuary. The walls finally closed in. In December 1976, facing extradition and the loss of his freedom, the aging forger took an overdose of sleeping pills. On December 11th, the man who lived 1,000 lives was dead. 3 years after the death of Elmyr, Fernand Legros was sentenced to 2 years in prison. However, having already spent an equivalent amount of time in pretrial detention, he was released immediately. Legros died of throat cancer in 1983. Réal Lessard also faced legal consequences, receiving a short sentence for his involvement in the criminal enterprise. Decades after Elmyr de Hory's death, his forgeries continue in the art market. Experts estimate that hundreds of his works remain in circulation, collectively worth millions. Whether seen as a villain, a visionary, or something in between, Elmyr de Hory was a man whose inability to succeed as himself tempted him into a life of stolen identities and corruption. His brushstrokes continue to provoke, his story forever woven into the history of art, truth, and deception.